Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I'm a rare disease patient, a Rare New England board member, and your host for today's show. Today, our show features Denee, Chmiel, and Terri Long, both from the wAIHA Warriors. Denee is a 46-year-old stay-at-home mom to 7-year-old twin boys and is a patient with wAIHA, which stands for Warm Autoimmune Hemolytic Anemia. Prior to being a stay-at-home mom, Denee worked as a respiratory therapist and clinical liaison for over 16 years in hospital settings. She was diagnosed with CVID in March of 2020, right at the beginning of her state's lockdown during the pandemic. She was diagnosed with warm autoimmune hemolytic anemia later that same year in December, right before Christmas. Denee is now in remission with wAIHA and has since become a volunteer with the wAIHA Warriors and is on the board of directors. Denee is passionate about creating awareness about the disease of wAIHA, as well as letting others know about this wonderful support system. Terri Long is a patient advocate of the wAIHA Warriors, helping build the organization from its inception in April 2020, stemming from a need of having a community of rare diseases to connect stakeholders throughout the world. Through her role, she has been able to form deep connections with patients, caregivers, physicians, and advocates to discover ways to amplify the patient voice throughout the entire drug discovery process. Hi, ladies. I'm so happy to have both of you here with me today. We are going to jump right in, and I'm going to start with you, Terri. First, I want to ask, what is wAIHA? Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, thank you so much. So wAIHA stands for Warm Autoimmune Hemolytic Anemia, which I know is a complete mouthful, but it is a type of autoimmune hemolytic anemia where the immune system creates these antibodies. And these antibodies are typically IgG antibodies, and they destroy the healthy red blood cells that we see in our bodies. But what makes wAIHA really unique is that these antibodies are working at its peak at our body temperature. Something else about wAIHA is that it can either be a primary condition, which means that we don't know what the cause is, or it could be secondary to other conditions such as leukemia or lupus. And there are so many different treatment options that a patient can consider when treating their wAIHA. And that can include corticosteroids, rituximab injections, immunosuppressants, splenectomy, which is the removal of your spleen. And the best option is really decided between the patient and physician together. And one other thing to note is that 1 into every 3 individuals out of 100,000 individuals have wAIHA every single year. So while it is pretty rare, this is makes having a community even more important.
Right. Excellent. Thank you so much for that explanation. And I think hearing kind of the overview is so important, but I also do love for viewers to be able to get the actual personal stories. And for that, I want to turn to you, Denee, and ask you to kind of share your personal experience with rare disease and with wAIHA.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me. So my personal experience with wAIHA started in December, just this past December, and it came on rather suddenly. Excuse me, I had noticed on a Saturday that my urine was darker than normal and odd in color. And I thought, okay, I'm just not hydrating enough. And Sunday, woke up feeling fatigued and having some GI issues, which is not out of the norm for me because I also have common variable immune deficiency. So that's part of what I deal with frequently. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to rest today and make sure that I hydrate well enough. And I get up on Monday and I noticed that I looked a little jaundiced. So then the big red flags went up because I've never had that happen in my life. I even had my husband come in and look at me. I thought, this is so strange. It scared me and I was in disbelief. So he checked me out. I went about my business. I had to take my boys to the dentist and got home. And I thought, I need to call the doctor. I was really short of breath. I was weak. I was unusually cold. So I called my primary care doctor and got an appointment to be seen that day. And her nurse practitioner saw me and she was equally concerned. did a physical exam and wasn't really sure what was going on. So let's order some labs. Did a urinalysis that came back negative. And she said, well, we'll do the labs. And she said, she knew I was avoiding going to the emergency room if at all possible, of course, because of the pandemic. But she said, if we have to, I'll let you know. So she called me that night, sure enough, and multiple labs were off and out of whack. She didn't know exactly what was going on, but she knew that I needed to go to the ER. The biggest thing was my hemoglobin had dropped. My liver enzymes were elevated. My bilirubin was high, my LDH. So she didn't know for sure what was going on, but she's like, you're gonna have to go to the ER. Okay. So off I go that night, frightened. They admitted me to the hospital that night. They initially thought it was my gallbladder. But the thing that was so crazy was, they had just checked my labs late that afternoon and my hemoglobin, I believe, was at 8. And then just a few short hours later, it dropped a whole nother point. So that added a whole nother level of concern, thinking perhaps that I was bleeding internally. And they, I have a medical background and know enough to know, that something was very wrong. Okay, so my hemoglobin had dropped as low as 5, 2 separate times while I was in the hospital. I ended up having a total of 7 units of blood while I was there. And they initially started me out on high dose steroids as the first line of treatment for wAIHA. When that did not halt the hemolysis enough, my body was still destroying my red blood cells faster than it could produce them. Then she said, so they treated me with the steroids. We did B12 injections and folic acid. And then the next line was, we're going to try IVIG, which immunoglobulin therapy, which was ironic because my primary treatment for my immune deficiency is also immunoglobulin therapy. I do that at home subcutaneously every 2 weeks. So the irony of that, it amazed me. And that's what it took. Additionally, 3 more months of steroids. I had the 5 doses of the IVIG, and then 3 months later of steroid wean and continued treatments and blood work. And I finally was put into the remission at the end of March. So I remain in remission today. And I'm so very thankful for that. It did take me a few months to kind of gain any kind of strength back. I was so weak when I was in the hospital because my hemoglobin was so low, my blood volume was so low, my heart rate would skyrocket just even getting out of bed. I ended up, I had the heart monitor on, I was on oxygen just to kind of help my body compensate. It was the scariest thing I had ever been through. And I, quite frankly, was afraid I wasn't going to make it home. I didn't know. My family was my support. And finding wAIHA warriors, as I sat and did my research and tried to learn about this disease, when I found that there was a group that existed with other people like me, it brought me some peace of mind and made it a little less scary. I went through so many different tests to try and figure out what triggered mine. They ultimately couldn't figure it out and decided that it was likely just some autoimmune condition that I have, which I have psoriasis, but she doesn't know if that's what triggered it or if it was a virus or a medication. We just knew it was the warm autoimmune portion of things. So support was so helpful and so necessary. I was finally able to go home just in time for Christmas.
Mm-hmm. So. That had to be the best moment, right?
It was. Yeah. I burst into tears when I got into the car because I didn't know if I was going to be home for Christmas to be with my family. I hadn't seen my boys. I was there for a week. Mm-hmm. We FaceTimed, thank goodness for technology.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that is something. So, I mean, I didn't ask you this before, but if you hadn't gone to the hospital, things would have kept deteriorating, correct?
Yes,
I mean,
correct.
Without the interventions that you received. So yes. I can imagine that. Thank goodness that you took the action you did. And thank goodness that, even your doctor knew you needed to get to the hospital. And I know your medical background, I wanted you to possibly touch upon that because I think even when I spoke to you the first time, you are very well spoken medically. And I don't think that's common for a lot of patients in their first time. And how did that help you know how to advocate and to, speak up for yourself? Because it sounds like you had to do a little of that as well.
Yes, I did. Thank you. It definitely helped with both conditions. It was a lot to wrap my head around, having these two strange diagnoses in 1 year, and then again during a pandemic. It just really was. I think the things that kept me from going too crazy were the support of my family and focusing on being a mom, and then my medical background. That is what really helped me keep my mind straight and, focus on understanding what was going on with my body. I worked as a respiratory therapist and a clinical liaison for 17 years. And those two things are what helped me realize I wanted to advocate for patients. I advocated, that was part of what I did, not only taking care of people, but you're automatically an advocate for patients doing either one of those jobs and being in the medical field. So I think that's why it's so important for me to do that, and for me to share my story and not be afraid to do that, because it could help other people. Why wouldn't I do that? Anything I can do to help, because I don't want anybody else to have to go through this, and know that they're want to let them know they're not alone.
Right. Well, and I love that. And I know that has kind of led you to taking more and more responsibility with the wAIHA Warriors, correct?
Yes. I want to do as much as I can, and I'm so grateful for them.
Mm-hmm. Great. And that is a perfect segue. I would like to, Terri, if you could tell us a little bit more about the wAIHA Warriors and kind of, what is the organization? What does it look like? And, you actually introduced me to Denee because you knew we needed to hear her story to understand what the disease is. But can you tell me a bit about the organization, please?
Yeah, sure. So the wAIHA Warriors is a 501c3 advocacy organization, and we founded it in April of 2020, so right when the pandemic began. And it was founded really out of a need from the patient community. So oftentimes, a lot of people who have wAIHA don't even know that they have the condition. And once they do know that they have the condition, it's like, where do they turn to? Where do they go to? So especially at a time like COVID and with the pandemic happening and everyone being isolated, we thought it was the perfect time and the perfect opportunity to really connect everyone in one space across the world. One of our biggest, goals for our community is to provide a space where people feel comfortable. They can share their stories with one another, learn about the different educational content, learn about the innovative research that is coming out on wAIHA. And it's honestly just so incredible to see how big our community has grown from, just 30 members when the pandemic began to now over 170 members from all over the world.
That's wonderful. I love that. And what type of forum are they able to connect? So where do patients find each other? And I will say, I'd love for you to mention your website as well, because I went there and I thought it was so well set up, just to really provide the support. I am a patient, so not of wAIHA, but looking at it, it was so many options there. But I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So with the wAIHA Warriors, we started off as a small Facebook group, and that kind of grew to other social media platforms like Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all of these different social media platforms is a different space and provides different content, but it really is focused on amplifying the patient voice and finding opportunities for patients to get access to the different resources out there. And after, having our community grow from our small Facebook group, we spoke and formed deep relationships with our patients and other stakeholders like caregivers, physicians, and that really helped inform our website. So we have a website, it's www.waihawarriors.org. And we created a space that is easily navigable for different stakeholders. So let's say you're a patient and you want to go on that website and you want to learn about, the different signs and symptoms, different treatment options, the different clinical trials and research that is going on. That is, a space for you. And we also have a space for physicians and caregivers to, feel like they're also supported as well in navigating this health journey. And we want to strengthen relationships from all ends, so that way the patient can get the best course of treatment and that they can feel as comfortable and supported as possible.
Great. And I know the team aspect in healthcare is really important. And I think that's what you're touching upon, that, an illness does not just impact the patient. It's the team, it's the family, it's the caregiver, it's the physician, it's the researcher, it's the scientist. And so kind of having a place where they can all come together is excellent. Denee, you touched upon it a little bit, but I wanted to ask you too, as a rare disease patient, what has it felt like kind of personally and emotionally? Like, what has that been like for you and for your family? Because you mentioned 2 young boys. And so I think, I think everybody likes to talk about their kids, but how has it been for them, and how, has the family been working through these situations?
My boys have handled it incredibly well. With the immune deficiency diagnosis, I would say that maybe wasn't as scary for me. It was because it's something I've dealt with for years. I was sick for years, and to finally have an answer and a solution and a treatment was just a godsend. So I was grateful for that, but they were there for my first infusion. I've always been transparent with them. I explained things to them. And I think, again, that goes back to having been in the medical field, because the more you explain to them, the more comfortable they'll be with everything, and, break it down and let them know it's not so scary. So they've handled that very well. The thing I was worried the most about was when I was diagnosed with wAIHA and I was in the hospital, because I left when they were in bed. I had to go to the hospital after they went to bed and was admitted. And for me, emotionally, it was horrible. I'll get choked up talking about it even now. I was so afraid. My husband is my rock. He is amazing. He has handled all of it very well. He also has he was a paramedic at one point in time. He works in safety. So he is a very level-headed individual, happily, and handles all of this very well, and is great at keeping things on the up and up and normal for the boys, and being transparent with them too. They handled me being in the hospital far better than I ever expected. They handled it better than I did.
I understand that.
Yeah. So, and as far as the rest of my family, the same. I think communication is everything, not being afraid to talk about it, not being afraid to let everybody know what's going on, because then it's not so scary. It's always going to be hard, but the more information everybody has, the better off you are. And that stands true even with kids. Sharing what you need to share with them. And so for me, it was difficult. The hardest part was the wAIHA and being in the hospital and just overcoming what it all meant and how it was going to impact my life. And the same thing with CVID, but that, I guess, I had more time to wrap my head around.
Right.
So it's definitely been a journey.
And how are your boys today? How old are they today?
They're 7 now. Their birthday's in July. I homeschooled them last year. They're back in learning in person this year, and they're doing well with all of it. They're troopers. They have just amazed me.
Right. Well, sounds like you're pretty amazing as well. So I guess that all works out very nicely. So what is in store personally and professionally for you, Denee? I know you're now on the board with the wAIHA Warriors, and what does life look like today and going forward?
Today, getting my hands back into things and helping and having an active role in wAIHA, I love. I stopped working at the bedside when I was pregnant with my boys, and then I stopped working as a liaison when my husband had to travel for work. So I've missed the medical field. I've missed, taking care of people and being some form, what I didn't even realize I was advocating, and now I do. So this is a natural fit for me. It feels very comfortable, and it's, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. Personally, getting great, really and truly just grateful for being alive and getting to have every day with my family and friends means it's always meant a lot, but it became so much more apparent after what happened. It really changes your perspective.
Right. And couple that with the global pandemic, it's definitely a lot to navigate through emotionally and, medically. So,
yeah.
it's great that you, have some plans and some things in the works, and, that you're becoming what I like to call an accidental advocate, because I became one of those in time. So it looks like you've landed there as well.
Yeah.
Terri, can you tell me, what should our listeners know about the wAIHA Warriors, and, what is the major message, and kind of what's going on today with the wAIHA Warriors? I know you've had some new developments recently.
Yeah, sure. So the wAIHA Warriors is constantly finding new opportunities to amplify the patient voice. We want our community to know that patients are being put first and foremost, and we really listening to understand their needs and how we can better support them in their health journey. So we recently met with our patient advisory board and medical advisory board, and something that really stood out from those meetings was this aspect of mental health and prioritizing mental health. So we have provided new content on mental health resources, information on, you've been newly diagnosed and you don't know where to go, what to do, what steps to follow. And also there are a lot of people who have wAIHA and just didn't even know about a community. And our main goal, for whether you're newly diagnosed in remission, had wAIHA for years and just didn't know about a community, we want everyone to know that this is a space for you and for everyone to exchange their stories, any experiences that they may have had, what has worked, what hasn't worked. And also it started our new mentorship program. So complementing our existing community, we wanted to take it a step further and match up mentors and mentees together so that, they have someone that they can go to immediately. So that's our newest initiative, and we are continuously evolving and growing together as a community. So we look forward to expanding globally, because we know a lot of our wAIHA patients and other stakeholders are located across the world, and we want to really provide health equitable processes and practices, so that way everyone can feel comfortable.
I love that. That's wonderful. And Denee, what advice would you give to other wAIHA or rare disease patients and their families after all that you've been through?
Never give up. Always advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Or do the same for your family member if you're advocating for your family member, and so that you can learn about as much as you can about your rare disease. That knowledge is everything and makes it so much easier to cope with and navigate. Also, find a support system. Make sure, whether it's your family or your friends, and looking for a group like wAIHA Warriors, it helps so very much. And not being afraid to talk about your story. You don't have to, but I can say from personal experience, the more I've shared my story, whether it's with family or friends, with wAIHA Warriors, I do it on social media as well. It's very cathartic, and you will find there are a lot of other people, more than you maybe would expect, that are like you. And then you make your community that much stronger, and you make your network that much stronger. And it really helps. That support means everything.
Wonderful. I love that advice. And I think they're great takeaways from our conversation today. Before we wrap up, do you have any final comments, either of you? Is there anything I missed that we wanted to talk about?
So as of October 2021, we hired a new wAIHA Warriors executive director, and her name is Karen Jones. We are super excited for her to take on this new leadership role, to be the face of our organization. We really couldn't have thought of a better person to represent the wAIHA Warriors. She has been, really involved in our patient advisory board, as well as, being in our community since we started it in April of 2020. So we look forward to working with her, and for her to, do this outreach and engagement with our patients and be involved and lead our new initiatives.
Wonderful. Well, that's great. And I'm sure that if anybody wants to go to the website, they can learn all about the latest happenings with the wAIHA Warriors. And I do want to just spell that. Can you just spell the abbreviation so people understand?
Yeah, sure. So that's www.waihawarriors.org.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for being here. I really am pleased to bring the information and education about wAIHA to others, and then also for patients having somewhere that they can turn to when they are diagnosed with this. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Before closing, we provide our viewers with an opportunity to share comments and our questions from our prior shows. Rare New England in Motion is the perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging with our community. We love to hear from you and interact with you about our guests and topics. You can reach out anytime to info@rarenewengland.org. This show wouldn't be possible without the generous sponsorship of our show sponsors, Pfizer, Ultragenyx, Vertex, Horizon, and the law offices of Weiner, Jackson, and Simmons. We appreciate your continued support. We're always looking for other sponsors and guests, so please reach out to us via our website if you are interested. From all of us here at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, and then think zebras. Thank you.